Good morning, everyone. I'm Christy Connor, the host of Friday Coffee Meetup. We're so happy to have you here. We missed you last week, but hope you had a wonderful 4th of July if you're based in US. Friday Coffee Meetup is the largest active innovation, entrepreneurship, tech meetup in Los Angeles, California, with about 7,000 members. We are focused on bringing innovation to the Southern California community. Although you're seeing my face right now, there's actually a whole host of people behind me who make this happen each week. They spend a lot of time and effort to bring this content and programming to you. Let me show you them because they're a very handsome group of people. And in this group, we have people who help us organize speakers. We have people who manage our podcasts and our YouTube channel. You can find the information about our podcast and YouTube channel in the chat window. We will be doing Q&A today after Adriana speaks with us. We handle Q&A through the Q&A panel at the bottom center of your screen. So I will aggregate questions after, and that's how we will do our Q&A. Adriana today, she is going to ask possibly a few questions via the chat window, so you can chat your responses there. The chat window is traditionally unmoderated, so make sure and, be on your best behavior there. And we are thankful for you, our members, for joining us and hope that you're staying safe and well during these stay-at-home restrictions. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce Adriana Torresan. She is here to talk to us about her startup failure. Creating a startup is very difficult and it takes nerves, resiliency, resources, time. And so she's going to talk to us today about her own lessons learned after working on her startup for 3 years and then failing. She is a product expert and serial founder who has worked with companies like Disney, the Capital Group, BMW. And so we are grateful for her vulnerability in sharing the lessons that she has learned and sharing with us today. With that, I'd love to welcome Adriana Torresan. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Christy. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So let me start sharing. 1 second, please. Okay, all looking good? Okay.
Yes,
so
great.
Okay, thank you. Hello, so let me take you back to March 26, 2018. Was the first time I was in Kansas City, Missouri. It was a very cold morning, mainly for a girl from Ipanema. Fun fact, I was born in Rio. As I walked out of my hotel lobby, I looked across and I saw this huge plaza I would be crossing. As I start crossing the plaza, I start wondering, what am I doing here? It was super cold for me. I was pushing this very heavy suitcase and I was on my high heels, so I was afraid to fall. So I was a little like, ah. I started wondering if people would like what I was about to present. I would start wondering if my husband would manage the kids for 3 days all by himself at home. I was super, I was afraid, I was apprehensive, but I was also excited because I was about to give birth to my 3rd child. I was about to present a product I've been working the past year. I was going to the Smart Cities Conference week and was pure joy. However, when I got home after the conference, I realized the baby was still in diapers. So today I will share with you what fills the diapers of a startup. But I am curious to see where is everyone connecting from. So if you could enter in the chat, I would love to see that. However, Christy, I am not sure if I can see the chat.
Okay, go down to the bottom of your screen, kind of hover over the bottom, and you'll see next to share screen, you'll have a little pop-up that looks like a message. And you can click on that and it'll pop it up. And I see Mark from Chicago. Yay. Sorry.
Hello, Mark. Santa Monica, Echo Park. Glendale, Altadena, Burbank. Thank you so much, everyone. So here I was at San Francisco. Here I was at the presenting my product at the Showcase Challenge. It was a fantastic experience. But before I get into the lessons learned, let me briefly share what my product was about. So I created a civic engagement platform. It was a SaaS product, a service as a service, software as a service, and was a B2B2C business where my primary customers were local government and the consumers were residents. The idea was to connect and make people aware of all the free events and programs and services offered by the city and the local partners, the nonprofits, the community. So that in a nutshell, that was what the product was about. I would also be curious to hear from you guys, if you have a startup, which stage of your startup you're currently working. If you are working on your MVP, please write on the chat pre-launch. If you have a startup that had launched and you are like in the trying to reach the product market fit, right? Product market fit. And if you are a investor, advisor, service provider, I would love to hear from you in the chat. That's your role. And it's a way to start getting connected and then maybe bring the conversation later for the networking part of this event. Don't feel shy, everyone. Anyway, let's move on then. Okay, about to pitch, about to launch, great. Thank you for sharing, Mandy. So here was my first mistake. I had an imaginary product market fit early on, and here's why it happened. When I first pitched and sold the idea for the pilot city, they loved it. After that, I created a mobile app prototype, as any good user experience designer would do. And I went to test that prototype with residents. I got great feedback. However, and then after that, I went into development. I started building my MVP, basically. So the mistake was I did not validate my idea with the B2B, with the other cities, right? I was super excited. It was my first startup. I want to get things done, right? I don't want to bother with like testing small details. I just want to get things done. After all, I had this incredible client waiting for my product. So the first lesson learned was make sure to validate your hypothesis. Hypotheses are educated guesses of your current assumptions, basically, of your business, your customers, the value that the product you're building can bring to them. And you can write a hypothesis like this: because we believe in X, if we do Y, we expect Z to happen. In my case, the hypothesis, one of the main hypotheses was, because we believe cities want to increase civic engagement, if we build a mobile app aggregating free local events and services, cities would pay for it and find it valuable, right? A year after I launched this first startup, I joined another startup in the sports space as a co-founder and chief product officer. And I made sure to go through this hypothesis validation process. During that time, I started working with a template like this, and that's why I'm sharing. So with hypothesis, you want to make sure to list your hypothesis, try to have a framework around how you plan to, what's the format of that experiment, the time will take, the cost, and then track the results. Now, customer development, it's one of the most popular ways to really start validating a hypothesis. Customer development, it's an interview with your potential customers, right? It's not usability tests, so you should not be taking any prototypes. It's just a conversation. It can take between 15 to 30 minutes. It can be informal or schedule in advance. And if you have a B2C, you want to interview about 100 potential customers. If you have a B2B, the suggested number is 50. Actually, who suggested this number is Steve Blank, who is considered the father of the customer discovery, customer development framework. On his book, he talks about what are there are no fun facts inside your building, get outside. Sorry guys, I have two monitors here and I'm getting a little confused looking at two places. Okay, so there are no facts inside your building, get outside. However, I believe that the get outside portion needs further discussion. Okay, now I cannot move forward. Okay, sorry. So back to my second startup. During this, when I was working with the second startup, I had the opportunity to I get a hold of this book called the Mom Test Book. And it has this title because it says, if you have a business idea and you ask your mom what she thinks, she will lie to you because she loves you, right? So you need to know how to ask those questions. You should start by asking questions like this: what are your big goals and focus right now? Then you narrow down, what are your goals and big focus in the exercising, for example, if you're developing a product for that space. How do you solve the problem today, right? You will validate your customers, you will validate the problems, you learn a lot about the competitors. So it's a great way, it's a really great framework to do those interviews. Competitive analysis, it's another way to start understanding the market, even though it's sort of a soft way to validate a hypothesis, but I decided to share because it's extremely important. So you want to look at your direct and indirect competitors. Airbnb, when it started, Craigslist was their direct competitors, right? Because they didn't have any direct competitors at the moment. Today they have VRBO and many others. You want to look at about the 5 top players, and it is an ongoing process. It's a little bit time consuming. The suggestion is to review those competitors every 3 months, but at the same time, you should not be focusing on your energy to understand your competitors, because after all, the best way to innovate is by understanding your customers and doing this customer development ongoing in your business, getting feedback all the time. Brief guideline how to do competitive analysis: understand how old the company is, the number of employees, the funding rounds, the annual recurring revenue. Then you should be looking at the products, the features, pricing model. Try to read some reviews online. It's the best way to learn about customer feedback. And then an analysis, understanding their strengths and weaknesses. And then what are the opportunities you found? What are the gaps you can fill with your product solution? Other ways to validate your hypothesis is through Facebook ads. For example, you can have a letter of intent if you have a B2B, right, before you start developing. You can have a pre-launch waiting list or prototypes, right? There are different types, many different types of prototypes you can create to validate a hypothesis. So what are your hypotheses? How are you validating them? If there is one thing I would like you to take from this presentation today, is this question. Even if you had already launched and you think your metrics are great, you are always working with hypotheses. Every moment you bring a new feature, you do some improvement, those are hypotheses, and you can test them in different ways besides just having developers bringing those features to the product. My second mistake, I built a MVP. And now that sounds strange because I believe a lot of you guys are working on your MVP at the moment, but let me explain. The reason why my MVP didn't work, in my opinion, was because it was way too basic. I'm talking about the first MVP I launched in the market. I had a big list of events and I have some filters, but I didn't have any image, I didn't have any search, and I didn't have personalization, which was one of the core promises and one of the core values I think I could bring to the market. Before I talk about the lessons I learned from this, let's briefly look at the Lean Startup. I'm sure you have got a hold and read and are familiar with this book. It's the Bible for startups. However, the challenge of the MVP is trying to decide which features to include and which ones not to include on the first MVP. And understand this build, measure, feedback loop and how to take advantage of it and how to really use it. And understand that this is an experiment, right? So on his book, Eric says the MVP is not necessarily the smallest product imaginable. It's simply the fastest way to get through the build, measure, feedback loop. The problem is that when you start bringing developers to build that MVP, we can end up spending a lot of time, months, or even years in that first iteration. I have seen many startups making that mistake. So the first MVPs should really be more a prototype rather than the final product, right? And there are so many different techniques you can use. There is one that I like the name, it's called the Wizard of Oz. You build the front end, but if the back end, you don't need to build the admin tool, you do everything manual. Instead of building a native app, you can build a responsive website, it's much cheaper. So there are different ways to test and start cheap. And he also says the goal of the MVP is to begin the process of learning, not to end. I would rewrite the sentence and I would say the hypothesis validation is the beginning of the learning, not MVP. So let's take a step back and start looking at the hypothesis first before even start thinking about building anything. So the lesson is don't build an MVP, build an MDP. An MVP stands for minimal delightful product. It was a term created by Adam Berry in his post from 2007. He basically says that products should be delightful. People should fall in love with it and not just viable. Design, mainly UX design and quality are the two main factors to build this MVP. In his opinion. However, my problem is that I am a user experience designer, so I had a box checked. In terms of quality, I've always hated seeing bugs in products, so I had a QA team doing a lot of tests. So I would add a few elements of how you can create this minimal delightful product. And one of them is collaboration. When you're defining your features, bring the team to talk about it, get their feedback, get your advisors, investors, your family and friends, your customers, talk with everyone, see what are people thinking, what is their feedback regarding those features. Plan the feedback loop, the build, measure, and learn. Don't rush to get into it. And when you are about to enter that loop, plan, right? Go through them a couple of times. And the way you can plan is through release planning, for example. It's a software development methodology where during the alpha phase, which is the first time you release the product, you only allow your team or maybe your advisors to look at it. So you measure their feedback and you learn, and then you go again through that loop, right? You improve. Then the second time you give a group to test, you give maybe to family and friends, or you can give to 100 potential customers. Then it's called the beta phase. And then you go through the loop. So if you go to until you do the final product release. So if you go through that loop a few times before you actually launch a product in the market, chances are your product will have a greater chance to succeed. The third mistake was the fact that I thought if I build it, they would come. They came somehow, right? But not as I needed to survive. My strategy was to go to some conferences to acquire customers and do organic marketing to acquire the consumers. Wrong, it did not work. So it's really important to have a strong marketing and sales plan. Allocate budget for it, right? Startups are not only about technology. I think it's a huge mistake that people make as well. At the moment we have an idea, if we are not developers, we immediately start looking for developers. So startups not only about technology, everyone. It's really important to validate your ideas and understand your customers, the problems, the market first. Consider partnerships to increase that market and sales reach. And if you're not a marketing expert, get a co-founder, which takes me to the fourth topic. I was a solopreneur. I had a CTO who was my co-founder, and he was extremely smart, but he was super busy. So he was mainly focused on development. So that's why I still consider myself a solopreneur, because I was doing everything but development. So the lesson learned is find a co-founder now. I know it's hard, it takes time, but it's extremely important. In fact, YC only accepts application if you have a co-founder that has at least 10% in equity in your company. Just so you understand how important it is for accelerators, investors, and etc. And here's a few ways: Angel List, your own network, co-founders labs. Those are some interesting ways to find co-founders. Once you find that person, think about you're dating the person, give them 3 months, set some milestones, and see if you guys can work well together. And make sure to find someone that will wear all the hats with you, or share the responsibilities, right? That's what I mean. If you're hiring someone to do marketing, see if the person can help you with, I don't know, accounting or sales or any other thing. Hiring. Here's an interesting fact I found recently. 2 founders increase the odds of a startup success with 30% more investment, 3 times the customer growth rate, and a higher likelihood the startup will not scale too fast. So get a co-founder, everyone. It's super important. Before I talk about my last point, I want to make sure I have my contact information, but Christy also shared. So the last lesson learned was the fact I did it, and I did it all. I hired, I fired, I sold, I cried from now and then with my developers because we weren't able to get anywhere for some period of times. But I launched a product in a city with over 200,000 people. And if you ask me, closing Lupin was the hardest thing I did in my life after all the ups and downs and all the money I spent with it. The answer is no. I am an immigrant. As you know, I have this super thick accent that if I speak too fast as I did here today, you might have had problem to understand me, and I apologize. And I had 2 natural deliveries. So closing Lupin was not the hardest thing I did in life. In fact, after having kids was the most exciting thing I did in my life. So don't be afraid, get it done. After all, it's the best way to learn. And we don't know what is happening in the upcoming months or year during this pandemic and with the planet and with business in general. But at least I hope you now have a better understanding or foundation of how you can validate a hypothesis and succeed and create an incredible business. So just to recap, make sure to validate your hypothesis, build a MVP, not an MVP. I have a strong marketing and sales plan, find a co-founder, and get it done. It's a fantastic experience. Before we finish, I have a survey. If you could point your camera to this code, a link will pop up and there is a 3-question survey. And if you'd like to get a template for the hypothesis validation, please enter your email address and I will make sure it will appear in your inbox. So thank you so very much, everyone. I really appreciate and I would love to hear your questions now.
Thank you so much, Adriana. That was fantastic. And we appreciate you sharing your lessons learned and talking about the challenges that you had, because so many face the same challenges. We are going to do Q&A now. Go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A panel at the bottom. Click, do your QR code here. Adriana, I also heard you mention before we started, you are starting a group for founders who are looking to create startups. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for asking, Christy. It's focused in digital product strategy, management, and UX design. Yeah, it's an 8 weeks program. Please feel free to reach if you'd like to learn more. Thank you for asking, Christy.
Great. So reach out to Adriana if you are interested in being part of that cohort, the course. Our first question is, Adriana, did you say that you sold it, and how did that go?
Yes, so the original sales was fantastic, right? That's why I thought I had product market fit. I didn't know what product market fit was at the beginning. Is the question how I got that sales done?
Or like, did you sell your startup at the end or did you close it down?
I'm sorry, I closed it down.
Okay, close it down. Got it.
Yeah, I closed it down.
Do you have any projects that you're excited about since you're a serial founder coming up that you're looking at?
When the pandemic hit, I started having many ideas, of course. But at the moment, I'm really focused on helping other startups. So that's my current project. It's leveraging all this 20 years of experience in corporation and in the startups to help other startups make it happen.
Fantastic. And then what happened to your first client? Could you elaborate how many other cities you approached and what their response was?
Yeah, I approached many cities. I looked at every single city in California. The nearby state was very a painful experience, and I was slicing and dicing what would be my ideal client. At the end was mid-sized cities. I was the one doing the sales, right? I was and was cold call. So I tried to go to the conferences. I might have approached, 100. I'm not really sure. I managed to get, I believe, meetings with about 10, 15. And at the end, as I said before, the product I had was too simple, was too basic. And maybe that was the reason why I wasn't able to start and launch this in other cities. But at the same time, right, I was bootstrapping. It's like that, the catch. It's hard, yeah.
Yeah. How did you get your start in UX?
My background's in graphic design. I started doing web design in the late 90s. And when I was in 2006 was when I became a pure user experience design at an agency called Schematic in Culver City. We're doing a lot of cool emerging technology projects. Was basically it. I wanted to join this incredible agency, and they had a user experience division specifically. But I was studying usability and doing UI and UX together before.
Excellent. And you're, coming from Brazil, do you still look at opportunities in Brazil, with your own startups? Have you thought about, I'm doing this here in US, but maybe doing something similar in Brazil as well?
Yes. But but Brazil, it's much harder. I think launching anything in the US is hard. In Brazil, it's 10 times harder. The economy there is really hard, mainly these days. But I have a old friend of mine. We try to implement the idea there. We actually started with schools. The idea was to improve the communication between parents and schools and teachers and districts. But we end up doing this pivot to the local government. And yeah, we try to see how we could implement that in Brazil, for sure.
Excellent. And we have a question. I know I need a co-founder, but I don't know how to start to look for one. I feel like there are many risks in trying to choose a partner. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with that?
There are risks to choose a partner, mainly if you don't know them. They usually say the best partner are the ones you had worked in the past and you have had an experience before, but it's really hard to find that person. You know, it's a matter of luck. But it is still extremely important. Again, as I said, like the YC and many other accelerator programs and investors, they want to see you have co-founders and people truly invested in your business. And on the day-to-day, it will help immensely, as I said before. So the risk is for you not having a co-founder. It's much higher than to have one, in my perspective.
And do you recommend kind of putting in place a legal agreement between you and your partner, your co-founder?
Yes. Find a lawyer that can help you craft a very good agreement. It's very important. And there is this cliff note that's the first year something happened. I will not even attempt to explain the kind of stuff here, but it's, yeah, absolutely. I am a true believer of signing agreements up front and having everything paper, because you never know, mainly if you don't know the person, mainly if it's a new person. For sure.
And, you know, with a co-founder, relationships can be challenging. I thought it was really interesting, that 30% statistic about having a co-founder, you might succeed more at 30%. It is a scary thing, but I think the relationships around that, right? That you're forced to be able to have a relationship. I think that says a lot about having the co-founder. How do you manage your other relationships? You said you cried with your developers. What other relationship management did you kind of do through this process?
A quick story. My first CTO, we were partners for the first 3 months. She was we worked together in a company before, but it didn't work. After 3 months, I need to let her go, and I cried as well. And we cried together. Like, I'm a crier, apparently, because as I'm getting older. It's hard, but in terms of relationships, it's, you know, trying to be transparent and open and honest with them, respectful, right? Everyone has their own personal issues as well. It's a balance, and, you know, it's open, and mainly during these days, we are all at home. You need to be constantly checking in, see if they are doing well, see if they need anything, there is any block, right, that prevents them from moving forward. It's constant communication.
You know, you mentioned coming from Brazil to US as an immigrant. How do you think that experience kind of contributed to your resilience in creating a startup, or being open to the adventure of creating a startup, if it did?
Yes, yeah, it does, right? I think everything we live in life make us what we are today. And yes, absolutely. And back in Brazil, my life wasn't easy as well. My parents got divorced. I was very young, and we didn't have the easiest life financially for many years. And coming here, even though I came, right, with some budget to study in San Francisco, I got a job right away. I was selling bagels. That was my first job in San Francisco. It was very hard. Yes, absolutely. I think it made me what I am today, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts around the sales and marketing plan?
Yes. If you don't have any experience with marketing and sales, there's Attraction is the name of the book. It's a fantastic book that talks about, and I can read the name of the author from here. It's there in the shelf. It talks about 19 different channels in marketing that you can use to promote your brand. And it talks about picking 3 channels to do a test. And then the one that was more successful, stay with the channel until and fully explore until you exhaust the channel. And those channels are right from social media, SEO, offline marketing, and so on. Going to conference, networking, and etc. Blog posting. But in general, if you're not a marketing and sales expert, get advisors, hire a consultant here and there to give you some broad overview. Another mistake that we make is we try to figure out everything ourselves, and we pour all our money in development. Yeah. Bring experts. If you can hire them full-time, which you probably can't, hire them to do some few hours of consulting. The amount of expertise you can bring, we will gain, and the insights will be tremendous.
Excellent. That was our last question. Did this bring up anything else for you from the questions, or anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
Oh, everyone, I really apologize. I think I spoke a little bit fast.
No, you were great.
And
you were great.
My coach was like, make sure you speak slowly. And I've been trying to speak slowly so people, I can speak with more clarity. But it was a pleasure, and I'm thrilled to be here.
It was a pleasure to have you. I'm actually going to do a photo because I realized I did not do that in the beginning. So actually, if you can stop sharing, and I'm going to get you on the center screen, and then I'm going to take a photo of you really quick.
Okay.
And then, oops, wait, I don't want to end the meeting for all. Let me just get this chat window out of the way and change it to speaker view for you. Then normally I do snag it, but it takes forever. So today we're just going to do the camera. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, Adriana, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing from the heart and the pain of creating a startup. And for everybody for attending next week, get excited. We're having Paulo Perangin. He's going to come talk to us about animate companions that enhance our lives with Moxie, his new animate companion. So join us then. For those of you who would like to stay on for open networking, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.